In the fifth part of the tutorial, we will continue developing our library management application. If you haven't watched the previous parts of this tutorial, please do so now. In the part 4 of the tutorial, we have defined the use cases of the staff member users that allow managing library items and members. In this part, we will define and implement the remaining use cases of staff member users. So in the previous part, we have defined the first 6 use cases. Let's now look at the use case number 7, where the user needs to register a loan. Let's think about this use case for a minute. In order to register a loan, the user needs to know the library item that is being borrowed and the library member who borrows the loan. So our use case could start from the menu of the system and display a form where the user can pick both item and member from the corresponding drop-down lists. But the user can already be looking at the list of items and members, where he can find the item or member he wants and then click some button to register a loan for this particular item or member. If you remember our user interface from the previous part of our tutorial, the application displays both items and members immediately when the user logs in. So it is easy for him to find an item or member in these lists using a filter, and then click a button next to the entry of the item or member to initiate the loan process for this item or member. Let's do exactly this for the list of items. So our use case could look like this. Here we assume that the user is already logged in. The user types in a few characters of the item title or some other attributes using available filters. The system displays matching item or items. A button called Borrow is displayed next to each available item. The user clicks on this button. The system displays a form of the loan where the form already contains the details of the selected item. The form also shows a drop-down list of all registered members. The date of the loan and the due date are automatically calculated. The user selects the member for which the loan is registered from the list of members and optionally changes the loan or due dates. The user clicks Save. The system registers the loan for the member. And an alternative method, at step 4, the user clicks on the Edit icon. The system displays the form of the item and the Register Loan icon at the top of the form. The user clicks on the Register Loan icon and the rest is the same. Let's now implement this use case. We already have a query that shows items and allows users to filter the items. So we will need to add an operation to this query to register a loan. This operation needs to display a form of the loan object already initialized to the selected item. The only way to do this is define a process which takes the item object as its input. For more details about processes, please watch the processes tutorial. So we need to start by implementing the process that shows the initialized form of the loan and then add this process as an operation to the query. I will define a process called Register Loan, and I will specify the item object as the input to this process. The rules of the process are very simple. It will just have a rule to show a form of the loan object and initialize it with the provided item. Let's just make sure that the form of the loan object looks okay. So we go to the loan object, open its form, and we can see the default form. By default, ORM displays member and item as agreed and lumps them together. So we will need to separate them and then display this as a drop-down. And then add the item object back again and display it as a drop-down as well. Let's now put item first, followed by member. Let's make the form a little bit smaller. Set the width of the drop-downs to be a little bigger. And then let's increase the label width of the column. Okay, and now let's set the properties of the item drop-down. So we will display author and title. We will fetch records all at once. And we will also sort records by title. The form will be initialized to the item that the user has clicked on, but the user can change it if he likes. So if he does this, we need to make sure that the list only shows available items. So we will need to filter the list of the items accordingly. I define a query. I define a filter with the following query. Find item where item available equals yes. Only available items. And for the member drop-down, we will display the name only, sort by name, and fetch records at once. Well, now the form seems to look okay. And again, when the loan is created, we do not need to show the return date and the loan status. So we will create two forms, one for creation and one for editing. So I'll copy this form, call one editing, and it will be used for editing only. And another one will be called creation, and it will be for creation only. And on the creation form, I will remove return date and status. Now I will add the register loan process as an operation to the items query. The operation will be of the start process type, and I select our process as the process to invoke. Note that the operation should only be present for the available items, so I will need to add an applicability condition to the operation. It's only applicable when the item is available. Item available equals yes. And I will also add this process as an operation invoked from the form of the item object. And this will take care of the alternative method of registering loans from the form of the item. I have to define it as panel operation. And the same applicability condition. Let's see now how this works. So I put the version under test. And start the browser. I can see my list of items, and I can now see the Register Loan button next to each item. The text is too big, so I will change it to Borrow a little later. But for now, let's just click on it. Note that both items are available, and so the button is present for both items. So we click on the Register Loan button, and our Register Loan process runs and displays the form of the loan. Note that the item is already initialized to the item we clicked on. Loan date is initialized to the current date from the initial value of the loan date attribute, and the due date is initialized by our rule that assigns it 5 days after the loan date. So we select a member, and when we click Create, the loan is registered, and as you can see, there is no longer a Register Loan button next to the item because it is now unavailable. Let's go back to the configuration tool, and the first thing I will do is change the name of the operation to Borrow so that the button does not look that big. Okay, let's now define a use case with the goal to return an item. There are similar considerations here. The operation can be invoked from the menu or from the list of items. It can also be invoked from a form of the member if this form shows a list of loans for the member. The use case when the operation is started from a list of items is very similar to the previous use case. The user types in a few characters of the item title or other attributes using available filters. The system displays matching item or items. A button called Return is displayed next to each borrowed item. The user clicks on this button, the system changes the status of the loan to Passed and makes the item available again. Let's think what's going to happen when the user clicks on the Return button next to an item. The system would need to find the loan for the selected item and then change its status to Passed. The rest will be handled by business rules attached to the loan and item, which will set the return date and make the item available again. So to find the loan and change its state, we need to write a process. The process will be taking the selected item as its input. The first action of this process will find the current loan against this item. So find loan where the loan is for the current item and its status is current. We don't want to find past loans for the item. The next action should just change the status of the loan to past. Note once again that a simple change, like the modification of the loan status, will trigger execution of the series of rules. It will calculate the return date and make the corresponding item available. For more details on this, please watch the business rules tutorial. So now we need to add this process as an operation to the items query. The operation will start our process, and the operation will only be applicable if the item is unavailable. Let's see now how this works. When we log in, we can see that the first item is unavailable and the return button is present. The second item is available and the borrow item is present. If we look at our member, we can see the current loan. Note that we can add the return button to this table here so that the item can be returned from the form of the member. When we click on the return button, our process runs and the item becomes available again, so it can be borrowed again. If we now look at the form of the member, we can see that the loan has changed its status to past. There is one other use case that we need to consider. This is when the system automatically reminds members about overdue loans. The user is not involved in this scenario, so this is a system's use case. In this scenario, once a day the system will check whether there are any overdue loans and will send emails to the members who own the loan. Let's implement this use case. First of all, let's define a notification that will represent our email. We will call it overdue loan email. The subject will be overdue loan, and for the message we will enter the following text. The message will assume that the loan object is in the context, so everything should start with the loan object. So we're here referring to the name of the member that owns the loan. And here we're referring to the title of the item. Now we need a process that will find the appropriate loans and send this email. The process will be called Send Overdue Reminders. The first action of this process will find the appropriate loans. So here we're finding loans with a due date greater than the current date and in the current status. And the second action will send the email. So we're sending the notification to the member of the loan. Finally, we need to define a scheduling rule that will run this process every day. So we define the rule called overdue loans. It will be run daily, and it will start this process at 12 a.m. in the morning. In this tutorial, we have finished use cases of staff members. In the next part of the tutorial, we will show you how to polish the user interface of the system.